You're listening to the Packernet Podcast Network.
What's going on, U.S. Cellular customers? I've got good news, so don't hit skip, at least not yet. I'm talking about their special customer event, Us Days. What is Us Days? It means exclusive offers just for their customers, just to say thanks, like $1,200 off any phone, plus $300 off any tablet. No, I didn't just misread that. They must really like you. Us Days at U.S. Cellular, exclusive offers just for you, just to say thank you. Right now, U.S. Cellular customers get $1,200 off any phone, plus $300 off any tablet. Terms apply.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, how to get 30, how to get 20, 20, 20, how to get 20, 20, how to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident panelist, as always, Ryan Schlipp. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_dada. Well, happy belated Father's Day, by the way. I always forget to mention, like, tomorrow's stuff. Plus, I forgot it was Father's Day, to be completely honest with you. I don't keep track of anything. So there's two main things that are on the agenda. Of course, you know, if the first thing runs long, then we won't get to the second thing. If they both come up short, then we'll have to find some other stuff to talk about. But I want to start with this. First of all, this has been talked about ad nauseum. People call in all the time and they'll ask about, you know, not even just wide receiver, but like number one, CB1, wide receiver 1, RB1, whatever, right? But then there was also, this was on June 13th, so a little less than a week ago, Tazeem Wajid, also known as Christian Watson's dad, posted on social media. He said, NFL, come on, man, I'm so sick of this. Sorry about the microphone. Give me a second here. NFL pundits question. Come on. There we go. I understand that you all, along with fantasy football folks, are obsessed with the wide receiver 1 narrative. That's true. However, is having 4+ of them, as does Green Bay, better than having 1 or nah? Now, for reference, I've noticed two main things. I mean, I guess you can call it 3. Two main things about Watson's dad. Also, Watson. Christian's dad. Number one, he is a very optimistic type of fan, like most fans are. He leans very heavily into the positive, possibly exaggerating into the positive, etc., etc. Number 2, very defensive of his kid, which is understandable. Number 3, he positions himself to be the opposite of one of the positive fans, and that is one of the, like, I guess you'd call it an analyst. Now, I see these things as a direct conflict, but we'll just leave it at that. But the bottom line is, if you argue with him, he's going to pull the analyst card because he is a former NFL player. The problem with the analyst thing is that he does tend to lean very heavily into the positive fan thing, and, you know. Anyways, he's claiming that we have 4+ wide receiver 1s, which is entirely possible. Because my whole question here is, what the heck is a wide receiver 1? By the way, this kind of blew up a little bit because Rev Trev NFL, friend of the show, or maybe more accurately, friend of me, responds to that and says, I get what you're saying, but if we're completely honest, we don't have 4 wide receiver 1s. Right now, they're wide receiver 2s. And let's just say that if the trend continues, that makes our wide receiver core one of, if not the best cores in the NFL. I don't care about the wide receiver 1 narrative. I care about winning. So the follow-up question is what makes them wide receiver 2s? Rev Trev says, well, numbers and production. And then Christian Watson's dad pulls out a 3-paragraph thing. Whatever. turns into this big whole back and forth. Of course, Tazeem says, I don't have to believe anything. I actually know football. Whatever. I think I want somebody to define what a wide receiver one is. Here's my thought, I suppose. I think what most people mean, that's not even fair. I think there's two main ways you can look at a wide receiver one. And I'll be honest, I don't know that the Packers receivers fit into either of these conversations. Number one is, as Rev Trev says, numbers and production. I've also heard people kind of refer to that as the guy that cracks 1,000 yards or whatever. I have one major issue with this. And maybe people that believe that would answer in the affirmative, but let's just take a hypothetical. Let's say you have Devontae Adams and you add Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So we got our speed guy. We got like two just really good receivers in Devontae and Jefferson. We got our slot guy and Amon-Ra St. Brown. We got four. Well, here's the question. Do we have 4 number ones or do we have 0 number ones? Because none of these guys, because there are limited numbers of targets that can actually go out, none of them crack 1,000 yards. We could argue about who has the most receptions if we want. The problem is, oh yes, somebody would. You pick one of them, it's going to be a battle. Because everyone's going to say, what about Amon-Ra? What about Devontae? What about Justin Jefferson? What about Tyreek? Whatever. That kind of sums up the two definitions of number one. Are we talking about talent, in which case we have 4 number ones, or are we talking about production, in which we have 0 number ones? I suppose there is a third answer, and that answer would be there's 1. Because that's, by definition, you can't have 0 number ones if you have wide receivers, and you can't have 4 ones. That doesn't make sense either. There's only 1. But by that definition, every team has a number 1, and it's just either the best or the guy with the highest production. But that's sort of a separate category. If every team has 1 number 1, and it's either the best or the guy with the most production. Generally, it's the same guy, but there may be extenuating circumstances. So I went about this a couple different ways. Number 1, ask the people on social media. We'll see what the results of that are. Number 2, ask every single robot that I can think of, including one that is basically a robot search engine, and so it'll pull up different articles and whatnot. But the goal here is, let's go through all the different definitions with 2 main purposes. Number 1, define if the Packers have a wide receiver 1. If who, then who. Right? So it's possible that according to a certain definition, it's 0. According to another, it could be multiple, but the point is who. And then we'll kind of tally them up and see, as a percentage, how often is a particular player considered a wide receiver 1. If that doesn't make sense, hopefully it will by the end. Okay? So here is the first definition via ChatGPT. Being a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL means that a player is the primary target for the team's passing offense. This designation comes with several key attributes and responsibilities. So this is sort of another one of those things where it's only 1, and having kind of perused the answers, I get the feeling that for the most part, the definition is there's only 1, but not every team has 1. That is this definition. The designation comes with several key attributes and responsibilities. Consistency and reliability. A number 1 wide receiver is expected to perform at a high level consistently, delivering strong performances week after week. They are the go-to player in critical situations. Number 2, route running and versatility. They must excel in running precise routes and be versatile enough to run a wide variety of routes, including deep routes, slants, and crossing patterns. Number 3, physical and technical skills. The number 1 wide receiver usually possesses a combination of speed, agility, and strength, enabling them to beat defenders, make contested catches, and gain yards after the catch. Number 4, high target volume. Typically, this receiver has the highest number of targets from their quarterback, reflecting the trust and offense's places in them. Leadership and presence. As a key number 1 wide receiver, often takes on leadership roles with the team, setting examples through their work ethic, preparation, and performance on the field. Number 6, defensive attention. They draw significant attention from opposing defenses, often facing double coverage or the opponent's best cornerback. Number 7, production and impact. Their production on the field is crucial to the team's offense and their ability to change the outcome of games. So, I think it's safe to say, based on this definition, the Packers do not have a single wide receiver 1. Who would that apply to? Would you say Watson has consistency and reliability? The answer is no. Route running and versatility? I'm not sure. Contested catches? I don't believe so. High target volume? No. Leadership and presence? Maybe, but it's not a well-known thing. Extra defensive attention? Maybe, if we include the safeties. Production and impact? No, because he's been injured all the time. He has never produced at a high level. Is there anybody that could possibly fill all these? In reality, the only one could be Romeo because he had the most targets. He had the most targets, the most yards, and the most touchdowns on the team in 2023 for receivers. So let's look at it. Consistency and reliability. Can he perform at a high level consistently, delivering strong performances week to week? His grades were 70, 60, 70, 70, 50, 60, 60, 60, 60, 70, 50, 60, 50, 60, 70, 50, 50, 90, 73. Now, I will say, he did deliver 2 of his best performances in the playoffs. His best game of the season was the wild card game, and then his, 3rd best game of the season, 4th best game was against San Francisco. But it's hard to say that he was consistent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We can call it 8 because one of them is 69.9. 8 games in the season is less than 50% of the games. I don't know that we can call that consistency. Is he a good route runner? I would say so. Not an elite route runner, but he's good enough. Can he run a variety of patterns? As far as I know, he can. Possesses a combination of speed, agility, strength. He doesn't necessarily have speed. Agility, sure. Strength, maybe. High target volume? Well, we've said he has the most targets. Leadership? I don't think so. Does he draw extra defenders? No. Is their production on the field crucial to the team's offensive success? I would say no. Week 18, he had 1 target, 0 receptions, 53 PFF grade. We had no issue beating the Chicago Bears without Romeo Dobbs. And that's just an example. Obviously, I can pull out several others. So I would say he's the closest based on this definition, but the answer is no. All right, let's head over to Twitter and see what Grok has to say. Of course, it has to be stupid about stuff. Little old me, Grok, here to shed some light on what it means to be a number 1 wide receiver in the National Football League. Great. What's your freaking answer? Stop being so friendly and stupid. Being a number 1 wide receiver is like being a lead singer in a rock band. Good Lord. I put you in regular mode. Anyways. You're the one who gets the most attention. Come on, microphone, wake up. You're the one that gets the most attention. The most targets, the most pressure to perform. It's not about putting up big numbers. It's about being the go-to guy when the game is on the line. A number 1 wide receiver is typically the most talented and productive receiver on the team. They're the one who defenses game plan against, the one who gets double-teamed, the one who still manages to make plays. They're the player who strikes fear into the hearts of opposing cornerbacks and makes quarterbacks look like superheroes. But being a number 1 isn't just about talent. It's also about leadership and consistency. They're the ones who set the tone for an entire offense, the ones who lead by example, and the ones who never take a play off. In short, being a number 1 wide receiver is about being the best of the best, the cream of the crop, the top dog. It's a title that's earned through hard work, dedication, and a whole lot of talent. And if you're lucky enough to have one on your team, you better hold on tight because they're the ones who can take you all the way to the Super Bowl. Okay, very similar definition, said in a very different way. But it's basically the same, and it obviously also alludes to the fact that not every team has one. So I would say, based on Grok's definition, again, we don't have one. I mean, first of all, when we say which guy gets double-teamed, who is the guy that gets double-teamed? If it's anybody, I would say it's Christian. I don't think you can argue that anybody else gets double-teamed. But Christian is extremely far from consistent, not only because of the injuries, but because when you look at it, the guy takes 8 weeks to get going, then he explodes for like 2 to 3 games, and then typically kind of nosedives again. And I'm a huge Christian Watson fan, as you know, but he doesn't fit that criteria. So the answer again here would be 0. All right, let's see what Claude has to say. Being a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL typically means that the player is considered the best and most reliable receiver on their team. Some key characteristics. So first of all, best and most reliable. Boy, oh boy. Well, first of all, let's look at best. It's actually very close. If you look at the grades, it would be technically Dontavian Wicks. Let's actually get rid of the qualifiers here. So actually, it's Bo Melton, but he only played 7 games. So, I don't know if you would include that. Then it's Wicks. Then it's Dobbs, Reed, and Watson. I would go so far as to say it would have to be Dontavian Wicks, although it's very close. But if you're looking at a guy that played 17 games, he was 3rd in targets, he was 3rd in receptions, he was 3rd in yards, and tied for 3rd in touchdowns. I mean, the production obviously is not exactly there. He also, by the way, was 3rd, almost 4th in routes run. So, again, if you bring up the opportunities, you could say that this is potentially the guy, right? In fact, let me do that for fun. Let's just look at the math on Dontavian Wicks. Let's say he runs the same amount of routes as Romeo Dobbs did and see what we get for receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Because we might be able to make sort of a reaching argument for Dontavian Wicks here, but I still don't think we're going to pass for double teams and whatnot. But let's just do it and see what happens. All right, so if we give Wicks if we give Wicks Dobbs's route running numbers, we're looking at about 109 targets, 73 receptions, 1,078 yards, and 9 touchdowns. All of those are just slightly above Romeo Dobbs, to be honest. And I have a feeling Jayden Reed would be just about the same. He'd probably pull ahead just a little bit, but they'd all be in a very similar category. At least he cracked 1,000 yards. Reed probably would too. What's really interesting, though, is Bo. And again, this is really reaching because we'd have to assume he could maintain that for more than double, almost 3 times. He played, again, 7 games. We need to see him do it again in, 10 more. But if you extrapolate out the amount of routes he ran compared to Romeo Dobbs, it's 159 targets, 110 receptions, 1,488 yards, and 12 touchdowns. That's looking like wide receiver 1 numbers. So bottom line is, as skeptical as I am that Bo Melton will actually maintain this all throughout 2024, if anybody played like a wide receiver 1 when they were on the field, it was Bo Melton. But anyways, that was just for fun. Now we have the numbers. We can see if that applies to whatever. But still, I'm going to say that, whatever. Where were we? So it says, being a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL typically means that the player is considered the best and most reliable receiver on the team. Some key statistics of a number 1 wide receiver include exceptional skills. So, we could maybe say Bo, you could maybe say Wicks, you could maybe say Reed, you could maybe say Christian. I feel like Romeo's maybe a little bit held out. I don't mean to keep picking on the guy, but I just feel like he's really solid in everything. I have a hard time kind of getting over the hump with exceptional skills. And that may be an exaggeration for all of them. But, with Bo and Christian, you've got crazy speed. Dontavian really is looking like a solid route runner. Jayden Reed, it's kind of hard to deny what he did as a rookie. Consistency, I would say Wicks would be the most consistent. Bo Melton really just kind of exploded for the 3 games that he played in. So Dontavian would kind of fit that mold. So, so far, he kind of checks 1 and 2, I think. Dependability, quarterbacks trust them to make critical catches in high-pressure situations. I'm just going to check that box. I can look into it, but the bottom line is I know that he's not going to get number 4, so... Commanding attention. Their presence on the field often requires the defense to allocate extra coverage, opening up opportunities for other receivers. So I actually found an answer to this. Digging around everywhere, PFF, SIS, whatever. And then I remember there's a wide receiver specific site called Reception Perception. And so I went and checked what they have. For reference, I looked at Justin Jefferson. They actually have double coverage as a thing on here. He is doubled 21.1% of the time. Christian Watson is double-teamed 3% of the time. Christian Watson is doubled more than anybody else on this team. Now, you can make the case that because they're so equal, you wouldn't double them because there's too much talent around them, fair enough. But that only works if we're talking in a sort of multiple wide receiver one conversation, I suppose. The bottom line is, does it fit this description? And the answer is no, right? We can argue with it. I could say, well, what about on a team with multiple guys that are all 10? Well, but I'm not going to. I'm just using the definition. Their presence on the field requires double teams. Going down the line, by the way, Watson 3%. Dontavian Wicks, just 1.1% of his routes was he double teamed. Jaden Reed, 1.6%. Romeo Dobbs, 2.1%. He's the second highest. So Christian Watson is doubled the most, so I was right about that, but still, almost never. Again, actual wide receiver ones, we're talking like 20%. And look, can we just be honest about it for a second? Do we have Justin Jefferson on this team? I'm not saying there isn't potential. I'm all in on Christian Watson. I'm excited about Jaden Reed. I'm really interested to see where Wicks can go. And heck, if Bo Melton can do what he did, which again, I'm very skeptical, partially because, really it was only a 3-game sample size and he just kind of, decimated everybody in those 3 games. But is it possible we have that type of talent? Maybe, again, Christian isn't Justin Jefferson, but he could be more of a Tyreek Hill type of a guy who is a number one. And by the way, he wasn't 20% either, but he was still 13.5% in 2022. They don't have a 2023 thing. They need to get some more people working over here, man. They don't have a lot of profiles. Anybody looking to do some work, go reach out to, Matt Harmon? I don't know. Who do we contact here? We need to get some people over there working. By the way, I need listeners working for SIS, PFF, Reception Perception, so that I can get some inside information. SIS is always looking for help. I actually reached out to them, but as I said, the biggest problem is they would need me working when I should be doing the podcast. They're very strict about all that, but you guys should go do it, man. If you got some free time, freaking do it, man. If you're retired, you're just looking for a little side hobby, a little tiny bit of money with some upside potential to kind of, I'm just saying, go do it. Anyways, nobody fits the double team criteria. It's just not a thing. We can go through this reception perception thing in a little, probably another day, but some interesting information on here. Anyways, why don't we take a break here? We'll come back. We'll rip through the rest of these definitions. We'll kind of see if anybody has a Packers wide receiver as a number one, and we'll go from there. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. What's going on, U.S. Cellular customers? I've got good news, so don't hit skip, at least not yet. I'm talking about their special customer event, Us Days. What is Us Days? It means exclusive offers just for their customers, just to say thanks, like $1,200 off any phone, plus $300 off any tablet. No, I didn't just misread that. They must really like you. Us Days at U.S. Cellular, exclusive offers just for you, just to say thank you. Right now, U.S. Cellular customers get $1,200 off any phone, plus $300 off any tablet. Terms apply.
With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
You're a podcast listener, and this is a podcast ad. Reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Lips and Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a reproduced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience with Lips and Ads. Go to lipsandads.com now. That's LIBSYN ads.com.
All right, so far we've looked at ChatGPT, we've looked at Grok, we've looked at Claude. All three of them, I would say, even if you kind of stretch it, they don't fit the definitions. They don't. Again, you can maybe try to tweak some things to get it to fall in line. I don't think so. I think if we're just sticking to the letter of the law of what they say, it's 0. Meta AI, which is Facebook's, lesser talked about, actually not terrible. It says in the NFL, a wide receiver 1 is a team's primary pass-catching specialist. Right off the bat, who are we talking about? I don't know. Again, probably lean Dobbs. Typically possess exceptional skills. Okay, so typically we'll just kind of leave that out. Quarterback's go-to target. I really don't know who that is. Again, we have to say Dobbs because he got the most targets, so it makes sense, I suppose. Here are some key aspects of being a number 1 wide receiver. Lead receivers in passing offense, so that's only Dobbs. Expected to consistently gain separation from defenders. Sure, why not? High catch rate and yards per reception. All right, well, we can check that. Catch rate, also known as reception percentage. Who among the Green Bay Packers had a high catch rate? Jaden Reed ranked 22nd. Tavian Wicks was 37th. Romeo Dobbs was 44th. If we look at, yards per reception? You got Wicks and Watson 24th and 25th. Romeo Dobbs, again, 44th. I don't think so. Comparing to the rest of the wide receivers, I wouldn't say that these are particularly high. Wicks is like top 32, I think, in both, but that's about it. Often draws double coverage. Nope. Elite speed and acceleration. That's really only Bo and Christian. Strong route running. Not sure that that's Christian or Bo. Reliable hands and ball skills. Wicks, Dobbs, Reed. Maybe not even. I know there's been, as far as catching passes that are contested, I don't think any Packers are particularly good at it. Ability to read defenses and adjust routes, I don't know. Physicality and toughness to withstand contact. Wicks is very good at that. Wide receiver 1 can transform an offense, creating scoring opportunities and stretch defenses. I don't know. Significant defensive attention, team's most valuable offensive weapon. Some examples, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill. I don't think so. I would say by Meta's definition, the answer is still 0 in Green Bay. All right, let's look at Copilot. That's Microsoft's thing, which is basically GPT-4, but we'll see what it has to say. In the NFL, the number 1 wide receiver refers to the team's best starting receiver. Typically, this player is a large outside receiver who can accumulate yards and touchdowns. So far, this could be several. Often the quarterback's first read, command of attention of opposing safeties. However, being a number 1 wide receiver isn't solely about stats. It's also about being a reliable playmaker week in and week out. Star power matters, as a true wide receiver 1 can significantly impact an offense. But depth and youth also play a role. So it's more than just fantasy football term. It signifies a key player on the team. I mean, that's super vague to the point where we could probably slam a couple in there. Now, actually, it can't be. It's only one because it says refers to the team's best starting wide receiver. I think we can stick Wicks in here. Large outside receiver who can accumulate yards and touchdowns. Yes. Often the quarterback's first read and command attention from opposing safeties. I mean, I don't know, man. Is Wicks his first read? I don't know. Oh, what is that other site? Oh, what is it? Gotta find it. Fantasy football stats, not StatMuse. Come on, you know where you are. Where are you? Boom, there it is. Come on, give me something. I thought Player Profiler might have it. I don't know. I don't know how to get the data for first, who's the first read. But reliable playmaker week in, week out. I don't think anybody's more reliable and consistent than Wicks. Star power matters. He doesn't have star power. I don't know, man. Can I give Wicks like a 0.5 on this? I'm just going to do it. For the sake of doing it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to say Wicks is the wide receiver 1 based on what Copilot has to say. But it's a stretch. Gemini, which is Google's thing, says the term number 1 wide receiver in the NFL can be used in 2 ways. The team's top receiver, this is the most common meaning. Here, the number 1 wide receiver refers to the best wide receiver on a specific NFL team. The player is typically the one who gets the most targets, passes thrown away from a quarterback, leads the team in receiving yards and touchdowns, lines up against opposing teams' best corners. So we can say Romeo on that one if we wanted to. The second is an elite wide receiver in the league. In fantasy football or general discussion, number 1 wide receiver can refer to any of the top wide receivers in the entire NFL. The exact number can vary depending on context, so top 10, top 12. These players are most statistically productive wide receivers in fantasy football assets. The Packers are not that. They're not top 10 or 12 in any of the top metrics. But let's just throw Romeo in there for Gemini. And then we've got Perplexity, which is like Google AI. It's actually a really cool resource. You should try it. Being a number one wide receiver, this is very long, so I'm guessing it's going to be 0. In the NFL is not strictly defined, but generally refers to the top receiving threat on a team who commands extra defensive attention, opens up opportunities for other receivers. So primary receiving option, primary target, don't know that. Expected to produce the most receptions, yards, and touchdowns, that's Dobbs. Often big physical receivers like Calvin Johnson, Julio Jones, we don't really have that. Who can make plays even when double-teamed? No. Size and athleticism allow them to win one-on-one matchups against top cornerbacks. Defensive focus, so double teams, no. System fit, not every team has one. So this is a no. So going through all the definitions that the AI has provided, if we really stretch it, there were 2 sites, Copilot and Gemini, that said we might have a wide receiver 1. In one case, it would be Romeo because he's just literally the wide receiver 1. He got the most targets, yards, etc. The other one was Wix because it was a little bit softer on basically just being the best or most talented wide receiver on a team. They both kind of relied on not necessarily being elite, just being the top receiving option for a team. All the other ones, though, when you look at top receiver, the answer is no, or wide receiver 1, the answer is no. So 0 for Watson, 0 for Reed, 1 for Wicks, 1 for Romeo. So that would translate to 14%, 0%, 0%, and 14%. If we kick it over to social media in that hypothetical situation in which you have Jefferson, Adams, Tyreek, and Amon-Ra, how many number ones are on the team? The top answer at 56.7% is 4. 21% said 1, 22% said 0. JJ said I would have said 3, but whatever. The answer he's essentially giving is 4 because the question would come down to who are like the top 10 receiving options or whatever, or top 10 receivers. If you think one of them doesn't apply, fine. It doesn't matter. Devontae maybe doesn't belong, or Amon-Ra, or whoever it is you take issue with. It doesn't matter. The point is, by definition, you would lean into 4 because it's a simple question. Is it 0 because nobody cracked 1,000 or 10 yards? Is it 1 because the definition of wide receiver 1 is the top wide receiver on the team? Or is it 4 because we're just looking at really elite wide receivers? Most people look at it and say really elite wide receivers. And honestly, I would kind of say that too. I think my top option would probably be 4 because all 4 of them are just elite receivers. Take issue with it if you want. It doesn't really matter. And then it just becomes a question of how would you quantify that? And I think the easiest would just be PFF grade. If you're a top, let's say 15 receiver, then you qualify. The Packers don't have any top 15 receivers. I think my next favorite option would be probably 1, which is the most elite. So you would say the wide receiver 1 on this team would probably be, Justin Jefferson or possibly Tyreek. It's like the most elite wide receiver on your team. That could either be, there's 2 different ways that can work. Again, it's the top guy, regardless of how good they are. He could be complete garbage, or the top guy, presuming that he's an elite wide receiver. In this hypothetical, it wouldn't matter. The answer would be 1. The one I like the least would be 0, which doesn't give any of them credit because the ball was spread around so much that none of them cracked these numbers of like 1,000 or 10. To say that team with Jefferson, Adams, Tyreek, and Amon-Ra doesn't have a wide receiver 1 seems to be the most absurd one to me. That's ridiculous. You can use it. It's fine because, who gets double teamed the most? I mean, honestly, you look at Jefferson, he's going to draw significantly less double teams because you can't leave Adams, Tyreek, and Amon-Ra with a defense with one leg. You can't do that. So nobody's getting double teamed, or very rarely. Nobody cracks 1,000. Nobody cracks 10 touchdowns. I guess you would look at it and say there's 4 elite wide receivers and none of them end up being a wide receiver 1. That's my least favorite explanation of this situation. Now, just to be clear, if we look at it and say from the 4 perspective, right, or 3 or whatever, you have to be a top XYZ in order to be a number 1 wide receiver. If we're saying top 10, the Packers have 0. If we're saying top 20, the Packers have 0. If we're saying top 32, which is kind of, we're not going to say that. I guess we can. If we say top 32, meaning you just need to be one of the top receivers out of 32 teams, some teams could have 2 or more, some teams could have less. We have 1, and his name is Dontavian Wicks. Again, we're excluding Bo Melton. I don't think there's any definition by which we have more than one in Green Bay looking at that sort of a definition. We kind of traversed multiple definitions there. Certainly not elite. In fact, if we look at actual elite, which we could just, rather than saying top 10, let's say you have to be a 90 or above, there's only 9 in the NFL. A.J. Brown, Puka Nacua, Jalen Waddle, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nico Collins, Brandon Ayuk, and Tyreek Hill, which is probably why JJ would have said 3, because Devontae Adams isn't on that list. In fact, he was 21st this past year. I just put him there because he's a understandable figure for the Packers and whatnot, Packers fans. Could maybe sneak DJ Moore in there with his 89.3. If you wanted to say 80 and above, then there's 19 still. The Packers don't have any. If you want to say production, 1,000-yard receivers, there are 30 of them. The Packers are not one. He is 32nd at 908. If you're looking at touchdowns, 10 or more touchdowns, there's only 6 of them. Jordan Addison, Cortland Sutton, Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and Mike Evans. Romeo Dobbs has 9. Again, from a production standpoint, from a talent standpoint, the Packers probably have 0, maybe 1 by the name of Dontavian Wicks. Why don't we take our final break? What I want to do in the last part, and we'll just continue on with this, I want to try to quantify what we do have in Green Bay, and then I want to go back and look at Christian Watson's dad and the arguments he made for why he thinks that we have 4, to see if we can either learn something or just simply disagree. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Have you ever experienced turbulence on a flight and wondered why?
And you can see all the terrain around you. You've got no issue with visibility or anything?
No, everything's PG.
Maybe you've sat on the tarmac for hours wondering why your plane isn't moving.
Well, we're outside here. They're saying the ramp is closed. They won't let us park because of Air Force One.
Listen in on the conversations between pilots and air traffic controllers on the Air Traffic Out of Control podcast.
510 Whiskey declaring an emergency. There's smoke in the cabin. I need to make a landing right now on 31 left.
We have the most interesting, wild, and funny ATC recordings you will ever hear. Check out Air Traffic Out of Control wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
All right, so I went back to the well here, talked to the robot. I said, let's parse this out a little bit. I said, there's this idea out there that there are 4 wide receiver 2s for the Green Bay Packers. What do you think? And I obviously fed in a bunch of data for it to look at. It said, okay, Romeo Dobbs, wide receiver 2 characteristics. High target volume, decent yardage, solid touchdown production, but areas for improvement in efficiency and yards after the catch. Dobbs performs well, but doesn't dominate in a way a typical wide receiver would. His stats and grades suggest a reliable wide receiver 2 who can be a strong contributor, but may lack the consistency and elite production of a wide receiver 1. Jaden Reed, high efficiency in yards after the catch, good all-around performance, but lower target volume and average depth of target indicates more of a possession receiver role. Reed's strong efficiency in yards after the catch make him a valuable wide receiver 2, etc., etc. Watson, high average depth of target, yards per reception, deep threat capability, lower reception efficiency and target volume. It says his deep threat ability is valuable, but his inconsistency and lower target share point to a wide receiver 2 role. He can stretch the field, make big plays, not as heavily as a wide receiver 1. And then Wicks, good efficiency, yards per reception, and yards after the catch, but low target volume. He shows promise and efficiency, performing well with all his opportunities. His stats align more with a wide receiver 2, who can step up when needed, but isn't the primary focus of the offense. In conclusion, based on the provided data, it would be accurate to say the Packers have a group of 4 strong wide receiver 2s. Each receiver contributes effectively in bringing different strengths to the team, but none exhibit the dominant, consistent production of overall presence typically seen in a true wide receiver 1. This could be a strategic approach, spreading the ball around multiple reliable targets, but it does suggest an absence of a clear-cut elite wide receiver 1. And I said, all right, if you had to kind of rate them as 1s, 2s, 3s, or 4s, what would you rate the receivers? So it goes through and reestablishes all the stuff or whatever. And it says for Romeo, he would call him, the robot, would say wide receiver 2. Dobbs has the highest target volume and solid production, but lacks the elite consistency and game-changing impact of a wide receiver 1. His stats and grades suggest a strong, reliable 2. Jaden Reed, wide receiver 2. Reed's efficiency and yards after the catch are impressive, indicating a productive and reliable receiver. His role as a possession receiver fits well within the wide receiver 2 category, making significant contributions, but not dominating as a wide receiver 1. Watson, wide receiver 3. Watson's deep threat capability is valuable, but his inconsistency and lower target volume place him in the wide receiver 3 category. He can make big plays, but is not relied upon as heavily as high-tier receivers. Obviously, the injuries and whatnot play into that. This is not to say that things can't change, just based on what it is right this moment. And then Dontavian Wicks, it says wide receiver 2/3. Reasoning, Wicks shows efficiency and good production in his role, suggesting he could be a wide receiver 2. However, his lower target volume and the need for more opportunities lean him towards a high-end wide receiver 3. In summary, Romeo Dobbs 2, Jaden Reed 2, Dontavian Wicks 2 to 3, Christian Watson 3. So I want to end with this. Christian Watson's dad goes on, and as I mentioned, he wrote a lot about this situation and why he believes the Packers have 4 number 1 wide receivers. So we'll allow him to make the case that nobody else has seemingly made. He says, which of these players from their first 2 seasons in the NFL is least likely to be a wide receiver 1, defined by the same idiotic definition fantasy football people reference, and what Dallas seems to use so well with CeeDee Lamb against us in the playoffs? What's sad about what you just shared, and this is in reference to Rev Trev saying we don't have 4 number 1 wide receivers, is that many of you continue to be drawn into the league of fantasy football over real football. So why does anyone who knows what they're talking about say we have 4+ wide receiver 1s? For reference, I haven't heard anybody say that except him. The reason is that every single offensive pass play has a read progression that starts with a particular player. We can put any of our top wide receivers in the position of that first read. We don't have to do what Dallas has to do and have CeeDee be the first read 90% of the time. We whoop Dallas with 4 wide receiver 1s throwing the ball all over Jerry's world to multiple targets and add San Fran on the ropes with the same philosophy. When you learn the game and quit spouting narratives that aren't even real football language, you'll understand exactly what I'm sharing and what Shannon Sharp meant by saying we have 4 one-ish wide receivers, a team that makes a hierarchy of pass distribution that can be pointed out by the defense before a play is even run, has already beaten itself in the biggest games in crucial situations. And then he posts statistics for people. None of them are particularly amazing. He doesn't show the names, but 16 games, 38 receptions, 446 yards, 3 touchdowns, 12 games, 483 yards, 1 touchdown, 14 games, 611 yards, 7 touchdowns, 9 games, 422 yards, 5 touchdowns. I don't know what these stats are supposed to be showing. But it's not a very strong case that I'm hearing. I mean, it's certainly he must have more cards that he's just not laying on the table, but it sounds to me that I'm hearing, number one, smart people know the truth, and what you're saying is just fantasy football nonsense. Like, okay, fair enough. So what is the truth? We have 4 wide receivers. How do you know? And the only thing that was really said is that we don't have that one guy that kind of separates. We have a group of guys that are all kind of on an equal playing field, which would also be true of a group of 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. Unless we just really, really, really lower the bar, because let's be completely honest. Let's go back to PFF for 1 second. And I know former football players are so much smarter than PFF, blah, blah, blah. If we go with the lowest common denominator of our wide receivers, as far as PFF receiving grade, that would be Christian Watson, who ranks 51st. Let's just say he's top 50 because it's close. We're really stretching this out to mean wide receiver 1s are any receiver that's roughly in the top 50, which, I mean, if that's the definition, because again, we can put anybody in that first read spot. Presumably that applies to Curtis Samuel, T. Higgins, Josh Downs, Cooper Kupp, Jacoby Myers, Calvin Ridley, Juwan Jennings, Christian Kirk, Garrett Wilson, Noah Brown, Romeo Dobbs, Jaden Reed, Terry McLaurin, George Pickens, Zay Flowers, Cortland Sutton, Adam Thielen, Demario Douglas, Khalif Raymond, Khalil Shakir, Odell Beckham, Dontavian Wicks, Devontae Smith, Tyler Lockett, Chris Godwin, Drake London, Stephon Diggs, Deontay Johnson, Amari Cooper, Devontae Adams, Michael Pittman, DeAndre Hopkins, DK Metcalf, Chris Olave, Mike Evans, Tank Dell, Rashee Rice, Jamar Chase, Deebo Samuel, Keenan Allen, Puka Nacua, DJ Moore, A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, CeeDee Lamb, Nico Collins, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra, Brandon Ayuk, and Tyreek Hill. And to be honest, I don't disagree with any of that. You think any of those guys I listed are incapable of being like a first read? They're all good wide receivers. In fact, we can extend that out below Watson. Brandon Cooks, yes. Kendrick Bourne, probably. Jordan Addison seemed pretty solid. Rashid Shaheed, DeMarcus, we're probably getting out of range here. Jerry Jeudy, maybe. Hollywood Brown, probably once in a while. Michael Thomas, probably. I mean, at this point in his career. Wan'Dale Robinson, Michael Gallup, Jackson Smith and Jigba. I'm just kind of naming names here. Devontae Parker. Some of these guys, maybe it was a little bit more in their past. I mean, we're certainly on the edge here, but I mean, if that's all we're saying a wide receiver one is, a guy that can be relied upon, I mean, there's got to be, I mean, there's numerous. I mean, you could say it's top 64, and essentially we're saying what? You're a 1 or a 2, right? I mean, that's what we can't say there's 64 wide receiver ones in the NFL. There's just not enough here for me to go on to say that I would agree that we have a bunch of wide receiver ones, unless we just massively lower the bar to what a wide receiver one actually means. We beat Dallas by spreading the ball all over the place. Yeah, that's true. So what? RevChev responds to this by saying it's okay to admit we don't have 4 wide receiver ones. It's okay to be realistic. I love watching Watson, Dobbs, Wicks, and Reed too. I'm a huge fan of all of them. It's just too early to make bold claims like this before it happens. You do you believe what you want, have a great week. He says, I don't have to believe anything, I actually know football. Y'all keep riding the wave of fantasy. I mean, he just keeps making these claims, but I don't know what we're talking about. In another comment, he says, I'm asking a serious question on if you know how to watch and break down tape. There's always the condescending comment. We have 4+ guys who could be fed wide receiver one targets. Okay, there's got to be 100 guys in the NFL that would qualify for that. In a given game, they simply aren't being used that way in this offense simply because not only do we have those guys, but we have 2 productive tight ends and running backs with receiving production. That for me is actually better than directing targets toward one player consistently. I don't have any disagreement with that. So what I'm referencing is watch the tape for the whys of distribution, and you'll understand that they work in complementary manner in this particular offense. However, if you take either of these players and put them on a team with less weapons, they've shown that they can be the primary target. So I don't know that I'm disagreeing with really anything he's saying other than just the classification. I agree that they're getting less because, Christian Watson's going to get less because Dobbs and Wicks, and because they're all relatively equal. There isn't that one guy that stands out. But I don't know that if you put Romeo Dobbs in Minnesota, he's not going to be on Justin Jefferson's level. Justin Jefferson's still going to be the clear wide receiver one. He's not going to be 1A and 1B, which is what would happen. Again, take Tyreek Hill and put him on that team. Who's the wide receiver one? I don't know. It's kind of a similar situation to what you have here. But if you put Dobbs on that team, Justin Jefferson's still the wide receiver one. If you put him with Tyreek is still wide receiver one. You put him on a team with a bunch of 2s, he's probably on that same plane. That's kind of the whole point, though, right? So yeah, the numbers are deflated because there's so many talented guys. That's absolutely true. And it's a good thing. If you put them on a team with less weapons, they've shown they can be the primary target. Well, yeah. A lot of guys have been the primary, a lot of bad wide receivers. Allen Lazard, no offense, he's been the primary receiver many times. MVS was a primary receiver once in a while. He's not a number one. Jeff Janis was probably that guy for like a game. It doesn't mean anything. And somebody brings up the Lazard thing. He says, no, Lazard was not the number one in targets. We could see very early in 2022 that Matt LaFleur was not making Lazard the first read most of the time. But again, first read doesn't mean anything. If you have a team full of 3s, somebody's going to be the first read most of the time. Does that make him a wide receiver one? The problem that I have here is there's no definition. Give me a definition of what a wide receiver one is, and then we can go and apply it to the Green Bay Packers. I'm not hearing a definition. I'm just hearing a lot of flailing. Give me a definition of a wide receiver one. And it sounds like by Watson's dad's definition, there's at least 64 wide receiver ones in the NFL. Maybe you could extend that out to 100, depending on which one of these sort of definitions he's throwing out there. And I'm sorry, if your definition of a wide receiver 1 extends to 100 wide receivers, you need a new definition. So, I mean, look, none of this really matters to me. My answer to this question when Matt Ramage asked me was the whole conversation's stupid. I think all of us are relatively happy with the wide receiver situation we have. We can debate 1s, 2s, 3s, whatever, but when we really get down to it, I don't think any of us debate any of the realities of it. Rev Trev and Watson's dad were arguing, but I think they agree on pretty much everything that Christian Watson's dad said, except the classification of wide receiver 1. Nobody disagrees that it's evenly distributed, and because they're, about equal in talent. I don't think anybody doubts that they're equal in talent at a relatively high level. In other words, it's not 4 equally talented garbage players. It's 4 guys that can be called upon in a moment's notice, of course, yeah. But if that's your only classification of a wide receiver 1, then there's a lot of them. Again, I listed off more than 50, and I don't think any of them would really be disputed. But I feel like we're playing with words when we say wide receiver 1, because the connotation when you think wide receiver 1 is a guy like Tyreek Hill. It's a guy like Jamar Chase. It's a guy, like Adams in his prime or whatever. And we don't have that. Now, again, I think Watson can be that guy. Maybe even Wicks could be that guy. Maybe Reed. Probably not, but possibly Dobbs. I don't know. Maybe Bo Melton. Probably not, but maybe. I'm not putting a limiting switch on anything, but based on what we've seen so far, I think the more accurate description would be 4 2s. Maybe you could slide a couple of them into the 3s category. But who gives a crap? We don't have 4 1s. I don't know what we have, but we got a good offense. Anyways, I'm going to get out of here. My family's mad at me. I'm spending Father's Day down in the basement, but you guys have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.